All right, what is up? We're gonna roll out for episode number 3, Outside the Dot podcast. I am Greg Smirk Schreiber. I got Badger here as my co-host, and we are back for another epi. And what's been going on, brother? How's life?
It's been really laid back and relaxing in a way. Like I haven't done too much, haven't been too busy. Just been I started a new Netflix series actually. I started watching Suits. It's so good. It feels like I'm addicted to it. Like I've been watching for I think around 5 days now, and I'm already on season 3, halfway through. Like and there's 12 episodes in season 1 and 16 and 2 and 3, so I'm grinding these episodes. But really other than that, nothing much has been going on. How have you been?
Overall I've been great. Last night unfortunately I didn't sleep too well. Tweaked my shoulder and my neck, so I skipped the gym this morning and I've been so consistent that I'm kind of upset about it, but we'll move on.
Yeah.
Inside the 1 week countdown for college football 25, that's huge. Early access is actually in 4 days, so pretty pumped. That's gonna suck my life away. You're gonna have to poke the bear to try and get me to record. But other than that, just kind of riding along, enjoying my summer, and it's kind of where we're at. So, we're in the dark times of hockey right now, and this will probably be a shorter epi just because there's not a whole bunch to talk about. We'll try and do what we can.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so weekends, weeks checking in, pretty quick today. We're at that time. There's not a whole lot going on in either of our lives, just like the hockey world. But we did have some small but kind of impactful news coming from the NHL with all of the draft picks that have been signing their entry level deals. This is a big deal, of course, because we have had some drama in the past where players get drafted and they don't want to sign. And for some of them, it's a college thing, and for others, it's they don't want to play for the team that drafted them. So this is news. I know that your boys locked down their first pick at least. Celebrini also signed his deal, so the top two off the board definitely signed already. Any other notables that signed?
I think Sam Dickinson out of London and who got drafted by San Jose 11th overall. I mean, as a defenseman, he had 18 goals, 70 points in 68 games. Like that's pretty impressive when you're playing in the OHL. I know it's like kind of a points filled league with all the young guys and all the talent. So I'm hoping this can follow through to the NHL just for his sake. I mean, he's in the Western Conference, so there's always a part of you that's like don't really want that to work out because then he could beat your team,
Yep.
being that he's in the Pacific and my Hawks are in the Central. Um, but yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
I just think it's telling, right? Like I said, there have been times where players are unhappy with where they get drafted. So I think that's the biggest point is that they're kind of accepting their fate at that point. Like, hey, I have a good shot at making it to the show. Um, but like you said about the OHL, and there's a lot of these guys that'll skill it up in the O, in the W too, and even in college. These guys will light it up, and then sometimes you just don't see it translate. Whether it's too much emphasis on the skill game and they're not ready for the physicality of the NHL, but you always hope for the best for these kids because they're living out a dream that a lot of us have had at some point. When I was young, my dream wasn't to make it to the NHL; it was actually to make it to the MLB. But as my life kind of went along, I started learning or leaning more towards hockey. But you don't want to see somebody's dreams fall flat. So it's just tough to see when these guys have such a high skill ceiling and then it doesn't pan out.
Yeah, another thing is that we've seen that Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini, and Sam Dickinson have all signed their entry levels this summer. So that shows that they're excited to go to San Jose and means that there's something brewing there that maybe the public doesn't know. But these guys know that they can go to the show early and then potentially build that chemistry for them for like the future down the road when they maybe are a contending team in 3, 4 years.
Yeah, they definitely have the deepest prospect pool right now in my mind. There's some debate, at least in the top five, but that team is, if everybody pans out the way that they should, that team can be dangerous in about 3 to 5 years for sure. We could be seeing Celebrini, Will Smith just absolutely light the
Tear
league
up
up.
the league, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that could be your next, your next tandem. That could be your next big duo that just goes on a tear.
And then going over to Levshinov, this shows that he's not going back to college and he's not playing in the NHL. So he's probably going to spend the whole season in Rockford, maybe plays 8 games in Chicago. But this will this season will definitely show if he's capable, being that he was just under a point a game at 9 goals, 35 points in 38 games. We know he's the big body who can play both ways. He can score and he can play solid defense, which is what his job is. So that's an obvious. But being that the Blackhawks brought a lot of veteran guys in, a lot of the young guys may fall in the lineup, like Landon Slaggert. He's probably going to be in Rockford next year. Frank Nazar, there's a possibility he's in Rockford next year. Lucas Reichel, he's not necessarily proven yet, so he may be in Rockford next year. In my opinion, I think Rockford's going to be an absolute force next year, and I think it'll build a lot of character for those guys if they end up going on a deep playoff run.
So I was browsing. I'm a social media enjoyer, as most people are these days. And on the picture of Levshinov signing his deal, all the comments were like 18 going on 38, and I just couldn't. I couldn't handle it. I mean, I genuinely do hope for the best, that unless he's playing the Preds. But I do hope for the best for him. But man, he's looking a little rough. That's a tough look. You want him to be that big body anchor, I think, on that defense, and that's not something that I think can happen right away. I think that's probably the hardest jump to make. If you're a guy who can snap passes tape to tape, that kind of transitions well, other than kind of reading the passing lanes, because they're going to close a lot quicker than they did at lower skill levels. But when you have to, you're now, you will be against the elite, right? Like, gapping those guys up is going to be way harder than it was in college, where, not to say that Michigan State's schedule was cupcake at all, but some of those guys maybe aren't ever going to hit the show. Like, that's the reality of it. So there is a big skill gap there, and I think that might be one of the hardest transitions to make, is as more of a defensive stay-at-home anchor.
Yeah, and then there are a few more signings. Jet Luchenko, 13th overall by the Flyers. Then Konsta Helenis, drafted 14th overall by Buffalo. And then Callum Ritchie from the Avalanche, who was drafted 27th overall in 2023. So, what do you have any thoughts on those guys? Or
I think this was kind of the point in the draft where we're going to see guys who probably don't make the show right away, even if they do sign that ELC. So I don't have too many thoughts on that. Again, it's probably just to get their professional career underway more so than anything else. And I know that that's the big thing too, is there's this kind of power struggle between ownership and player, and a lot of times the players want to burn a level of their ELC off as quickly as they can. So that's kind of quickly become a power struggle. So I think it might have a little bit to do with that. But I don't necessarily see any of these guys getting to the show right away.
yeah, I'd probably agree. They'll either when you sign your entry level, you can't go back to juniors, right?
I That's a good question. That is a fantastic question. I would have to research that and get back to you on that. I
Okay,
do believe that there is a loaner rule, though, unless that's changed in more recent collective bargaining agreements.
Okay, well, if that's the case and they can't go back, you probably see Richie in the lineup for the Avalanche playing in a bottom six role. Luchenko, he might be in the minors. Same with Helenis, but then Buffalo's also that they're not that like special team. Like as we've seen, they're making moves that are like they're like they're making bad moves in a way, and they're trying to get better. So making those moves are making their chances lower of getting to the playoffs. So adding maybe Hellenis will add another scoring touch, being that he played in the Finnish league, which I've heard is a very defensive and like hard to score league, and being that he had 14 goals, like that's impressive.
Yeah, it might be big. It could be a lot bigger than my personal take. That's very possible. It's
Mhm.
like we've said many times already in just 2 episodes. Like it's so hard to tell the future with limited information. So, these guys can. We've seen it happen before where they light it up and all of a sudden they hit the show and they can't do it. And the opposite is also true where you get these guys that they pop out of nowhere, and so you never know. It is a little difficult, but it is interesting to note that we do have to check in on that loaner, and if you can loan back to the CHL as a whole collectively.
Okay. Well
Any other
then,
notable drafts? That's signed draftees. Sorry.
no, that's it.
All right, so that's chalking up draft talk. Moving on, we have kind of two things that kind of go hand in hand, and we have the Penguins front office. Let's call a spade here. Dubas came in, and Dubas does what Dubas wants to do, and sometimes those are maybe not the smartest choices. He came in last year and aggressively pursued Erik Karlsson. There was rumors that he was trying aggressively before he got let go with Toronto, that he wanted him there too. With that cap situation, I don't really know how he was planning it, but as soon as they made him available, that was one of the higher marks, was that was something going on. But this team, I feel like they can't figure it out. They can't figure out what direction they want to go. Can't figure out if they want to try and give Sid one last run. Malkin looks awful. Let's call that the way that it is. Letang was solid for most of last year when he was healthy, but that team just couldn't figure it out. And it looks like they just pushed the chips all in again, or are trying to.
Yeah, I mean, you said they're trying to push the chips in all the way. I mean, like with what moves? They arguably didn't get better. They may have gotten slightly better, but they didn't get the big fish they were probably most likely looking for. Like the best guy they brought in, Matt Grzelcyk. Like I mean, that's not a team changing move that will get you into playoffs when you're 5 to 10 points out like they were last year. And being that they're bringing basically the entire Maple Leafs front office in, you may seem like playoff struggle like they had in Toronto, whether that be on the coaches or players like it's rumored to be, or if it's the GM moves. Being that Dubas was the one that signed um Tavares to his deal, right?
That is a
And
bad contract. That is a
yeah,
horrible contract.
and you're seeing them pay for that right now. They're strung up against the cap, and they have a third line center making, is it 11 or 10
I
and a
think it's I
half?
think it's 12.
12?
Yeah. I think it's like with bonuses and everything, he's at 12. It's something gross. Yeah, he's
So
making way
yeah,
too much.
so yeah, you have a third line center making 12 million bucks, and you could have three or four solid middle six guys over him, and they aren't able to get over the hump because of that. Luckily, this is his last year of his deal, and I don't think there's any chance he takes over three, if that. But yeah, we're diverting. So I'll throw it back over to you about the Penguins.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I mean, your point was that Dubas has signed some bad deals.
Yeah.
The Marner and Matthews matching extensions. One of those is going to pan out. The other, very clearly in my mind, hasn't. But to bring this back to the Penguins, you said that they might have playoff struggles if they do make it. But I kind of want to go a little farther back, and you said that they didn't make any moves that really move the needle in your eyes. But I would say that acquiring Kevin Hayes was a huge step. Now, yeah, sure, you lose Riley Smith. That's whatever. You lose a relatively proven goal scorer. But you bring in a guy who, in my mind, is a way better two-way player. So to me, this is a big move. And that's not to say that Kevin Hayes isn't going to light the lamp for you. I don't think he's going to do it at the same clip that Riley Smith is. In my mind, this is a very big move. So we can agree to disagree there, and that's okay. Remember, those are always positives for a discussion. But I love that move. Grzelcyk, I think, is more of a. I don't know. He's like that weird kind of in between tough guy, anchor, defenseman. Often gets caught too many times pinching. He's a weird player, man. He really is. So I don't know that I necessarily love that because you've already got Carlson on the back end. You've already got Letang on the back end, who, while not physical, are those guys that do want to pinch in and chip into the play. So I don't. That one doesn't move it for me too much. I get it, filling that spot out, but yeah, I don't know. I do really like the Kevin Hayes move though.
I think another thing is that you saw how, especially last year, Crosby had to put the team on his back. He had 42 goals last year, a quiet 42 goals and 94 points, which I think his 42 goals is second most in his career, if I'm not mistaken. But you saw Crosby fighting, you never see him fighting. It's because nobody had the same drive as him, and they were losing games they should have won in a tight playoff race, and that made them end up falling out. So I think if Crosby has a decline this year, which I don't think he will, I still believe they miss. But if he does have that decline, they are 100% not making it.
I think the funny part about Crosby is Crosby was wearing the weighted vest, and then he had the backpack filled with weights. My dude was carrying overload. This is nothing that we haven't seen out of these superstar players where they do kind of take on that extra load and are able to carry a team, but holy, get this man some help. I don't know what more you wanted. You had Gensel on his line for, a solid portion of the year, and it still wasn't enough to get that power. How do you have a power play with those pieces that was so abysmal? That was a large reason why they missed playoffs. Their power play clip was horrible.
I started watching Penguins games just to watch their power play, and I would predict they're not scoring, and then it would happen. It was that bad to where it was almost entertaining.
Yeah, I just don't know how you have those names on your power play unit and can't put one away. They tried so many different combinations too.
Yeah.
But you have I would say probably 2 of the top 10, at least not defensemen as a whole, but quarterbacks of the power play. You have 2 of the top 10, I would say, and you still couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
That's just ruthless.
Especially with their histories of being quarterbacks on the power play, and they even tried them together and it wouldn't work.
Yep. Yeah, it was a tough look. That being said, let's kind of pivot this conversation. We did kind of bring up his name, Sidney Crosby. There've been some soft rumors that he's a little frustrated with management and isn't entirely sure of the direction that they're going. Maybe he himself doesn't particularly agree with the moves. Now I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's kind of the way that the tonality sounds. But he's also a Penguin for life. I personally can't see him playing anywhere else. It's been too many years. This is kind of the same thing as Ovi, right? I don't think we ever see Ovi going anywhere else other than the Capitals. I think you just kind of ride that out. But it also sounds like Sid's kind of going to reluctantly sign an extension. Is there any talk here for any sort of movement, or are you kind of on the same train and you think Penguin for life?
I think it would be extremely weird if I saw him in a different jersey, but if he were to go to a different team, I think he has to go to Colorado.
Go play with the boy Nate.
Go play with Nate and win a Stanley Cup. because that Colorado team, they were looking for a number 2 center. And if you slide Crosby on that number 2 center role, you're looking nice. But being that's most likely not going to happen, I think he does sign an extension, probably around the 3-year range. But I think they have to give him the bag. Like he took that 12-year 8.7 AAV,
Yep.
which was like I think it was 104 around there. And I think with what he has done for this team and that hometown discount he took when he signed the 12-year deal, I think he gets paid over 10. Like, what do you think?
You can't even sign deals that long anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks, Kovalchuk. That's literally why you cannot sign deals of that length anymore.
How long was his deal?
Was he the one who signed a 15-year deal?
I think it might have been.
I believe his was 15 years. So, the collective bargaining agreement came in and said, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So, but it's tough, and I think the right thing to do is to ride it out as a lifelong Penguin. I think that's the right thing. I think at minimum you're giving 10 mil a year. You know, you can't expect these guys to consistently take a hometown discount. Obviously, there was the whole like Boston collective where they kind of all were doing it, and they were like, "Hey, look, if we have more money to provide for the rest of the team, we can build a better team if people are willing to take the cut." So, I don't expect that here, especially as that team does start to regress. They don't really have a good prospect pipeline, so give Sid his money; he's earned it. But just quick hit is if you're the Avalanche and you acquire Sidney Crosby, which Chicklets has been calling for years, specifically Biz, I just don't see Sidney Crosby ever playing second line center ever, even with Nathan McKinnon.
Would Nate go to wing then, or like would it be like a respect thing and be like, hey, here's the first line?
I don't know. They're tight, so they would figure it out. It's not a big deal, but
What would that package look like for a trade?
I mean,
Like what do you have to give up?
So like in my mind, the glaring need in Pittsburgh is probably defense. Obviously, Makar's untouchable. Taves is probably untouchable. You don't want a player like Samuel Girard, right? He's the same thing as what you already have with Letang and Carlson. So
And
you
they don't have Bo Byram anymore, so they can't use that.
yeah, if you had Bo Byram, I would say he would probably be like the centerpiece of that deal. I don't know what the Avalanche pipeline's looking like enough to be like, yeah, that's the guy. Like that's the one you throw in. I mean, you're probably looking at multiple first round picks. Like you would have to throw the absolute kitchen sink, but you acquire that piece, and I don't want to say a guaranteed cup because it's still a grind and injuries still happen, but
You're instantly a cup favorite.
Oh, for sure. Just like theoretically, watching the odds change if that trade were to happen would be hilarious.
Yeah.
They would just be. You would see just such a gigantic market number change on the odds.
And you would see so many people jump on the bandwagon immediately.
Oh, for sure.
Like your Twitter feed would definitely be hilarious and just filled with Avalanche like lovers.
Yeah, definitely. But no, that's what I would think is probably something around multiple first round picks and yeah, I don't
like
know.
a top end prospect, and then
it would have to be multiple top end prospects. I mean, even if it was a rental, like it's that high.
Do you think they send Mikko Rantanen in that deal?
No way.
Okay, agreed.
No way. They would probably try and send Nichushkin off of off of just the salary side of things, but
yeah,
that would be if the Penguins would want that. That's enough Penguin chatter. I have repressed memories of the Penguins. 2017 was a rough year, but let's move on to something new, and I mean that both literally and topically. We have the Four Nations rosters. Only the first 6 have come out, so this is kind of short, right? We don't have the full notes on who's on each team, but they did kind of give us a little teaser. So let's start with let's start with your boys from the USA. We'll start here. We'll kind of analyze this 6, and then we can move forward onto the other 3. Let's talk about the unit as a whole. I think is probably the best way to handle this, and maybe some possible strengths, weaknesses of the whole lineup, even though we don't know the rest of it yet.
Okay.
So for the USA, we've got the first 6 announced. You got 3 forwards, 3 defensemen. You've got Jack Eichel, Austin Matthews, Matthew Tkachuk, Charlie McAvoy, Quinn Hughes, and Adam Fox.
I think, like, just looking at it, those are all no-brainer picks, and your top 6 minus goalies. Like, I think the U.S., their strong suit is goalies. Like,
Yes.
Jake Ottinger might get left off the team because you've got Jeremy Swayman, who's I'm pretty sure looking to be the starter, and then you have Connor Hellebuck, who's fresh off the Vesna, and then you have Thatcher Demko, who basically helped bring Vancouver from nothing to like the prophecy, and then you have Quinn Hughes, who's basically the Cale Makar of the U.S., who won the Norris last year. Adam Fox is like a if Quinn Hughes is an S tier, then Adam Fox is an A tier.
I'd
And
put him
then
at
you
like an
got
S minus. I think Adam Fox is right there, but I think that elite level talent is probably in any order, and it's probably Makar 1. Everybody knows that. It's probably
Yeah.
some order of Makar, Hughes, and Yossi is your S tier, like your bona fide S tier. Anybody else after that is right underneath that, and I think that's where Fox sits.
Mhm.
Not to jump the ship on this. This unit as a whole looks strong, and it's crazy that in their first 6 they don't mention a goalie because everybody knows Hellebuck's making the team, whether he's your starter or not.
Yeah. I think even after his playoff run, there's going to be questioning about that, but I think he's still a no-brainer, even if that playoff run against the Avalanche pushes him to the 3rd string. I still think he's a valuable goaltender who, being that this isn't necessarily a high pressure thing, because it's like a little break in between the NHL season, even though it is fighting for your country, basically, I think he'll be better. And that's just my opinion. I don't know if you think differently. But then transferring into Kachuk, Eichel, and Matthews. Matthews won the Richard this year. He's known for his goal scoring. Kachuk's got the gritty game, so he's going to be all over the forecheck, and he's going to be on the guy with the puck, hounding guys, hitting guys, and then also scoring. And then Eichel's probably that same player as Matthews who enjoys scoring.
So I think a little bit differently about all 3 of these players, right? And I think that they're all very deserving. That's not at all the argument, but they all bring a different dynamic, right? And obviously 2 you hit kind of right on the head, right? We know Matthews is going to score. We know he's got the quick release. We know that he's finding the back of the net. We know that Kachuk's going to be a pest. Like, that's just the way that it is. Eichel, I think, is kind of like this weird hybrid between the both of them. And I think that he's got a little more speed than both of the aforementioned guys, but I mean, he's going to hit a little bit. It's not going to be crazy. He's going to score. He's going to make the sick play. Like, he's going to pass the puck. So overall, this unit looks good. Obviously, they're coming in as one of the favorites, if not the favorite, when the full roster releases. I don't have a ton to add other than, it's crazy that we don't even see their real strength yet. Given this roster announce, I'm sure we'll see. I don't know that Luke will join this roster, but when we see the full release, I'm sure that Jack will be here. I think it's probably just a little too soon for Luke, but that's kind of just quick thoughts about fill-in roster. Where do you want to go next? We got 3 more teams to talk about.
Let's go to Canada.
All right, so we'll pivot from your boys to mine. And we will go over to the boys from up north in Canada. And they are a team that decided, we're not giving you 3-3. We're going to give you 5-1. So they gave 1 defenseman and 5 forwards. That 1 defenseman is none other than the best in the world, Cale Makar. And the forwards that they have announced already are 2 that we've already talked about, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon. Arguably the best forward in the world, Connor McDavid. Braden Point out of Tampa Bay, and Brad Marchand. My quick thoughts are this team is going to be front loaded. There's no doubt that their strength is going to be how deep their forward unit is. However, we see that they don't pick a goalie, and I don't think that they should have to announce a goalie in the top 6, but it is worth mentioning. That is going to be the struggle point for Canada. And I think it's crazy because for so many years we've been like, "Oh, they're good." You know, they've had Carey Price, they've had Roberto Luongo, they've had Marc-Andre Fleury. Like, they were good. They were covered. But now who do you have? Aiden Hill is a name that I'm hearing a lot. Like, if that's your guy against some of the best, now I'm a little worried.
Yeah, like you said, I think this team is gonna heavily rely on their forward scoring, and just seeing those 6 names all on the same team, to me, it's terrifying. Like, just imagine a line of McDavid, Marchand, and McKinnon. That's just, it's insane how good of a team, or how many forwards, like top end forwards, Canada produces. And being that they have the OHL and WHL and the Q, we know that they have a lot of skill. But just seeing all those names next to each other, it's scary.
We're going to pivot away from the probable two favorites, I would say. I would
Yeah.
say that those are probably the two favorites. We've got the kind of dark horses, and I think that that's no disrespect to these two teams because I think that they're going to show that they can definitely put up a fight. Let's go with like the ultimate dark horse here. Let's move over to Finland because I think people have a little more respect for Sweden than they do for Finland. So let's start with Finland, and we can end with, who most people probably think is like the third place team in Sweden. So we'll start Finland and then move to Sweden. So they are the first team to announce a goalie. And they also announced 2 defensemen, 3 forwards. Now, in my mind, if you were going to standardize your first 6 and you were going to say, like, this is the way you have to announce it, this is the way I would have it set up with those 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie. They named the following players. They named Sebastian Aho, Mikko Rantanen, Alexander Sasha Barkov, Miro Heiskanen, a little bit of a puzzling one here for me, Esa Lindell, and their attendee, presumably their starter if you're naming him in your top 6, is UC Saros. What do you think about this? We see like a quote-unquote full lineup here with this group. What do you think?
I think if this is the Finns' first line, that's outstanding. Like, you put Barkov in the middle, Aho on the left wing, and Rantanen on the right. Like, you've got size, you've got defense, and you've got goal scoring and playmaking. Like, you've got everything you want on that top line. And then moving to the defense, Heiskanen and Lindell were D partners, right? Or were
Um,
they?
I don't believe they were for a majority of the season, but they did spend time playing together. Yes.
Okay, so then you'd have to think that they play together, being that Heiskanen's that, like, speedy, like, scoring defenseman, and then Lindell's what, 6'7"? Like,
He's a big boy.
he's your more stay-at-home guy who's like gonna play defensive, and he's not really gonna be putting pucks on net. He's just gonna be feeding Heiskanen. And then Saros, I think that's pretty like a no-brainer. Like, he's probably the best Finnish goalie, and he's a top 5 goalie in the league. What are your thoughts on it?
Man, it's tough. I mean, that first quote unquote unit as a whole, let's call it, is insane. But how deep are they?
I was thinking
That's
the same thing.
that's the big question mark with this team. That line is going to be able to match anybody. They can. But what do you have after that is the big question mark for me here. I think that this team is going to stay competitive. And I mean, obviously, we know anything can happen. That's why athletes have to play the game. And it's not just, hey, let's look at stats on paper and there's your winner. but I'm very worried about the depth. I'm worried too about Saros's workload. Obviously that's my team. That's my Tendy. I know that we overwork that man. I mean, you see him. I mean, last year I think you saw him twice because I think Lankinen got the other 2 starts. But you see that guy sometimes 4 times a year. I mean, you know that he's getting. I mean, other than like back to backs, he's starting every game. He's playing at an insane clip. So I don't know what happens with that. Um, depth really concerns me with this team. I think that they can hang. I just think they fall short in terms of the rest of the three. Closing thoughts on Finland?
They are definitely the dark horse, like the team you probably expect to get fourth place. I mean, if Russia becomes a team, and then you have the Czechs, like I think it'd be cool if they combined just to have like another team. So it's not just like it'd be like an open play. Like each team would play 4 games, and then what the top two move on to the finals, and then the next two move on to the third place game. But I mean, I think they'll compete. I don't think they'll win. If they do, great for them. I think it'll be really impressive. But I just think with the depth we both believe them to have, I don't think there's any chance they compete in a long tournament.
All right, and our last team, and we're gonna after we go over all four, I just want to talk about potential expansion. Obviously, there's no rumors of expansion to this tournament, but you touched on it a little bit. I just have a question for you, kind of off of that at the end. Sweden went with the USA approach. They went with 3 defensemen and 3 forwards. There's one name on, yeah, there's one name on here that to me is a little bit of a standout compared to the others. But we've got Victor Hedman, no brainer. Erik Karlsson, no brainer. Gustav Forsling, this is the one that gets me. He had kind of his coming out party this year. He definitely hit more of the spotlight, but this one is still just a little bit of a culture shock to me. And then you've got your forward group of Philip Forsberg, Mika Zibanejad, and William Nylander.
I mean, like I think the Forsling thing, if he doesn't have the season he does, I don't think you see him in this top 6. Maybe not on this team at all. But I think just how he played in the playoffs and kind of took over that number 1 role, like because he was producing more than Montour at a clip.
In the playoffs,
And
yes.
yeah, so he basically became their number 1 defenseman and was able to play against guys like McDavid, guys like Panarin and Kreider and Trocheck and Draisaitl. Like the list goes on. So I think he almost proved that he can be on this team, and I think that's why he's on it. And then I think probably one of the most underrated players in the league, Philip Forsberg. Like this guy doesn't get talked about him as much. Like he scored 40 goals before, right?
Twice.
Multiple?
Twice.
Twice.
Yep.
And to get off topic, he's one of the guys that hit the Michigan. Not a big deal.
We just need the little Pringles stash, you know?
Yeah. Just put his face on the Pringles can in Sweden.
Yeah, literally. Do it up.
And then you got Nylander. We saw him kind of break out this past year and last in the playoffs. So we know he could play in that tournament style game. And then Zibanejad. I don't know too much about him, but I know he can score.
I wish
So
you'd pass
throwing it
more.
over to you. Wait, what?
I wish you would pass more. Sometimes he just takes the weirdest shots, and his passing ability is so good, and it's just weird. He's a little more 2-way, I would say,
Yeah.
than the others. I mean, not to say that Phil's gonna like take plays off. You know, obviously I see him all the time. I can't say that I watch all 82, but and you know those West Coast games are a little bit tough to catch, but you know, anytime it's a Central start I'm watching, and you know he's gonna be a guy who's gonna hit you, and he's big on the reverse hits. Actually, that's like one of his like kind of more like marquee things. But this 6 is just showing that their high end talent can match the other 2 top dogs. Obviously, we said that Finland's kind of trying to play catch up to everybody else in terms of matching them, but Sweden even has the depth in my mind to compete with the U.S. for sure and Canada for sure. Um, I don't think of this as a 1, 2, 3 as much as I see it as a 1A, 1B, 1C. Like that's in my mind, that's how tight these three teams are, and then Finland is 2. So just to kind of close that gap on how tight I see these teams grouped together, um, I don't know who the tendies are going to be for Sweden. That could potentially be a big deal too. Um, but from what we see so far, that lineup's looking good.
Yeah, and then you said you had a question for the end.
Yeah, so if we do see expansion in this tournament, and obviously we haven't even seen one yet. You mentioned Russia, and they're in kind of political jail right now, and that's just the way that it is. We don't need to delve any further than that, but that's the reason that they're not invited to this. You said that the next team up is the Czechs.
I did.
And I actually think that the Swiss deserve a nod.
Is this because of their world championships?
I think you want as many eyes on up and coming programs that you can.
So then just put both if they.
Well, that's why Russia's such a big component to this, right? Because you're not gonna add just one, right? You're not gonna add just the Czechs and make it a 5-team thing. But does Russia come back? Do we see them finally get liberated from this political shunning that they're getting? Like, or do they find a way to come in flagless like they did in the Olympics when they were doing the same thing? So I don't know what we'll see, but if you get put in a situation where Russia joins, then that's a really interesting situation of who joins with them, the Czechs or the Swiss.
I think. I mean, they could put it to 7 teams, but then you almost just want 8,
Right.
and we all know that eighth team is going to be severely worse than the rest of them,
Correct.
and we know they may never win, nor win a game. So like, it's a hard conversation to have because you want it to be good competition, but then you also don't want an uneven amount of teams. And this tournament's over the span of 8 days. I'm pretty sure, maybe 9.
Yeah, I believe it's 8 days.
Yeah, but like, it's hard because you don't want these guys to go from what they had in the All Star break and not really having to have to do anything to then like basically busting their butts to win a championship for their country during the middle of the season. That may gas them out or could lead to injury. Hoping that doesn't happen, but we may see teams in a potential playoff spot maybe fall because their star player gets hurt and this, I don't want to say meaningless tournament, but like it's important, but it's not something you're going to be like upset about if you necessarily lose.
It's
But
got
you
more
also.
meaning than the All-Star game, that's for sure. There's no
Oh
doubt
yeah,
about that.
100%.
And I think
But
that's
yeah.
what they wanted, though, is they wanted to play for the
Yeah.
pride and have something to play for, but
Mm,
they've got to make it worth it, right?
yeah.
Do we see guys opt out of this? Do you think that there's a chance that people opt out, or do you think that owners get mad, or something of the sort? Um, that's just kind
I,
of another side conversation. Just kind of quick thoughts on that. I know that for me personally, I don't see a ton of guys passing up the opportunity to represent their country, especially with the Olympics. I know we are finally getting ice hockey letting the NHL players go allegedly for the next Olympics. So,
2026, right?
correct. So that might kind of throw a wrench in that. But any chance
Yeah.
we see opt outs?
I I don't think you see opt outs for the top dogs like the McDavids, the Matthewses, etc. But I think you may see them from maybe like your bottom 6 guys. I don't necessarily know who they would be, but or or you have the guys that are in like the say like the Florida Panthers or the New York Rangers when it comes to this time of the year where they're in the first spot, like they're in that President's Trophy race. I think if you're on those teams who are in the top five, you don't really want to mess with anything and you don't want to risk getting injured because you have a long playoff run ahead, hopefully. But I mean, it's again all up to the players. But I think we do see guys opt out. I don't think it's many, but I think there will be a few.
And to be very clear, I don't consider like if you're hurt and you would have earned a nomination, I don't consider that like opting out. Like, hey, I need more time to recover. Like, I'm not. That's not an opt out. Whereas like, hey, I'm 100% healthy. I just don't want to be a part of this tournament. I'd rather have the break.
Yeah.
I personally see owners getting a little protective over this, depending on what the rule set is for the tournament. But that's really the only thing. Like that's the main reason why we did see that with the Olympics is owners didn't want to see their players go over and get hurt. I think we saw that in juniors was Kirby Doc broke his wrist.
Yeah.
Like that was a big one. And then that conversation kind of reignited. What happens if your prize prospect or your star player gets hurt during this? So just kind of a talking point.
Yeah, another thing to add is do we know how long the games are? Like are they going to be 20-minute periods or are they going to be like 10-minute halves?
I
Like
don't think we have any intel on any of that just yet.
cuz I think however long the games are that could determine teams' decisions and players' decisions.
They've been kind of slow dripping us information about this, so we're kind of getting more and more kind of as we go along, and as we get closer, we'll get even more information about it. So, as that happens, we'll kind of touch back on that and kind of see, how does that impact what's going on. I think that's about it because it is that slow time in the hockey world. So we have a couple things to close on, and that's about it.
Do you want to go over a few signings from like NHL players who have been in the league for a while? I mean, I think there's really only two that we need to go over.
Sure, go ahead and quick hit those.
Barrett Hayton signs a 2-year, 2.6 AAV with Utah. He's coming off a 3-goal, 10-point season in 33 games. I think being that he was the 5th overall pick in 2018, I think it's disappointing that he wasn't able to work out in Arizona. But what are your thoughts on it? I think it's an overpay.
I mean, I think that this is just a prospect who didn't pop, and that's gonna happen in any major sport.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if they gave him a loyalty money or what. I don't love this one. I know that he's tried to like reinvent his game, which is big, but obviously it's still not working out. So I don't love this one.
Yeah, I heard from Arizona fans he was playing a lot better in the second half of the season. I think he got injured in January.
Yep.
I'm not sure, but yeah, I heard he had a better second half and was starting to improve. So hopefully he can bring that into next season. The next guy and the last one is Adam Boqvist, who was bought out by Columbus, signs a 1-year deal with Florida at $775,000. He had 1 goal, 10 points, and 35 games played. Do you know if he was injured or not, or did he just not play?
That I don't know. I don't know if he was injured. This is a guy that I actually was really high on, even when he was in Chicago.
Yeah, I was too.
I thought that he was going to be kind of the next offensive defenseman. Because he was showing flashes of that, but it never worked out. Once he was traded, I believe, to Columbus. No.
Yeah, and the Seth Jones deal.
Hey, how's that working out for you, bud?
Yes, Adam Boqvist and David Yurchuk.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
oh no!
It was like because we traded our first that year unprotected, and
no.
It was like 6 overall.
Oh no, man!
Oh,
that's brutal. Well, hey, at least Boqvist is off of the team now, right? Like that's one kind of relief. But I was really high on him, and hopefully Florida can kind of have another reclamation project with him, the same way that they did with Oliver Ekman Larson, the same way they did with Gustav Forsling. So, I hope that this is a turnaround for him. But I mean, league minimum. I think that's league minimum, right? So
Yeah, for like a quote unquote veteran.
yeah, I mean, take a shot. I'm kind of sad Nashville didn't take that chance at that money. Why
Yeah.
not?
Mhm. Then do you want to move on to final remarks?
Yeah. So we got a big one. We got a really big one out of Dallas, and I don't know the specifics, but I know that this is making splashes because they are essentially starting their own like co-streaming platform. No, like they're kind of
Yeah,
partnering up, I guess.
yeah. I read a few articles on it. Um, it's like the company's called like Apparent Media Co. or something like that, and they're streaming the games off this. Like I don't know what it's specifically called, but it's like Victory Plus, and it's like you could stream every game that's not on national television for free, and because it's an ad-supported service, and I think that's big for Dallas fans because sometimes with the blackouts, you couldn't watch your favorite team's games even if it was on TV. So I think this is a step in the right direction, being that it's free. I mean, we've seen with the NFL, like with Amazon Prime, just to watch Thursday night games, there's a Monday night.
It's Thursday, yeah.
Okay. And then you have NFL Sunday Ticket, which
Yep.
I know they're working on details with that, but that's another thing where you have to pay to watch. Um, I know the NHL with ESPN Plus. I know people aren't a big fan of that. So I think being that this is free, it's a step in the right direction.
So to me, this is like two parts, right? Like I want to say Vegas is doing something similar, no? Don't they? I believe it's Vegas. They
I'm not
offer
sure.
something very similar where like as long as you are within market, like you can stream the games or something. It's something weird because it's like they're basically trying to combat blackouts, which is
Mm.
kind of the bigger part of this in my opinion. Is blackouts are the worst thing in sports streaming. We're getting to that point where like cable is not a common thing anymore. Like it is just dwindling. So to me, that's the big piece of this is like, hey, you're somebody who streams. Oh, but we see that you're still in that area, so you can't watch that team, even though that might be your team. And that's why some of these people do subscribe to these services. So to me, that's crazy that like you would even put that limitation on it. But I love kind of the breaking free. I think that that's huge.
Yeah, because you talked about blackouts, and because my family, we have ESPN Plus, so I'm able to watch all the games. But when I say I'm on the road and I go to watch the Blackhawks game, I I literally can't watch it due to a blackout. Like it literally says you are not allowed to watch this game because it's not included in your package.
Yep.
Like it just doesn't make sense, and I hope they fix it. I mean, nothing we can do about it, but it's annoying.
All right, and we'll end on some happy but sad news. Former Panther, and fall from grace, Jonathan Huberdeau, making some public comments about the Panthers winning the cup without him. Of course, he was traded to Calgary for Matthew Tkachuk. Um, the short of it is that he said that he's happy for the guys in that room, but he kind of hates to see it that he was the guy on the outside.
Yeah.
You're the one who gets dealt, and you see the people that you are working with essentially lift the most coveted trophy. Any quick thoughts on this?
I mean, just as a player, like that has to be horrible. Like the worst feeling. Like you were what 2 years out of winning the cup,
Yep.
and it's it sucks because he was very good on Florida, but I think with that Matthew Kachuk deal, it has been an absolute steal for the Panthers for what they gave up and what those guys have produced, and then being what Matthew Kachuk has done. I mean, again, it's hard to see that type of thing happen where he's on the outside of them winning the cup. But then again, this is a business, and you kind of just have to eat it and then keep moving on.
I think that's the most real part of that is that it is a business, right? Like, and you have to realize that these moves are going to get made, and that's a lot of times not to take this away from the news of Huberdeau saying this, but that's a lot of times people get so upset when their favorite player gets cut or traded or whatever. Like, it's a business. You have to put your team in the best situation that you can. So yeah, while it sucks to see him get traded, that was what they needed to do to elevate to that next level and get there.
Because they wouldn't have been able to make moves at the deadline due to his contract. Because he's making 10-5.
It's high. Yeah,
Yeah,
that deal is a little rough.
yeah. And then just to end, do you see the Beckett Seneca shirt that the Ducks were selling for merch?
No, but I did see their jerseys and I love them.
Their jerseys are nice, but the shirt, it's like a black and white photo of his face after he got drafted, and it says "What the Duck" on it.
I love it. I love it. I love small little like pun stuff like that.
Yeah,
Especially because I didn't have him going that high.
yeah, me either.
So I mean, obviously he showed he didn't even think he was going that high. So I love it. I really do. I think it's kind of a whole full circle kind of thing. So all
Yeah.
right, man. It's officially time to start counting down to college football 25. I'm going to waste my life away on that game. So you know what? I will catch you same time ish next week.
Just praying for the NHL season to start again. I don't
Yeah,
care
we
if it's
need
preseason hockey.
we need to get a little closer before we can start doing conference previews, but that's
Yeah.
next that's the next big one on the docket. All right, brother. Take care.
All right. See you.